From the world of AV programming and control with James King, I'm Steve Greenblatt, and this is Ask the Programmer. James, how are you today? It's good to be back for another episode.
I'm doing good, Steve. It's always great to be back here talking about programming and the world of AV, especially on the programming side. How are you doing?
I'm doing all right. I'm excited as well, and today we have a returning guest here, so that's always a nice thing. And he's also a good friend, and he's back. His original podcast episodes were on 132 and 133, so you can learn more about him and his background. But without further ado, we welcome back Marc LaVecchia from BMA Software Solutions. Welcome back, Mark.
Thanks. I appreciate you guys giving me the opportunity to talk about our subject today. I'm looking forward to it.
Absolutely. And, another reason for being excited for this episode is it's a subject that's near and dear to my heart and something that I was excited to see. Mark wrote a interesting article in Commercial Integrator, and that's what we're going to talk about today. It's entitled Modules, Plugins, and Drivers, the Case for Supporting Them. And it takes a very, a little bit of a sharp look at the need for manufacturers to understand some of the challenges that programmers face and why it's important for them to be part of the solution in helping to make their products easier to work with control platforms. So I'm going to let Mark elaborate a little bit more because obviously he took some time to really put together a nice article, and those things don't just happen overnight. So it must have been
No,
something important to him.
well, it didn't happen overnight. It probably took me 4 or 5 months to finish the article, as I'm sure you know. But it it's an important topic that I feel like our industry does not spend enough time talking about. And one of the things that I mentioned early on in that article is uh, we spend a lot of time at InfoComm talking about all kinds of buzzwords, right? We have ecosystems and best practices and all that other stuff. But in the end, none of this stuff matters if we all don't focus exclusively, or not exclusively, but heavily on uh, our profit margin, because nobody ever really talks about a profit margin, especially from a programming standpoint. When a manufacturer comes to sell you their product, they'll say, well, this is how much we're selling it to you, and this is how much you can mark it up, and that's your profit margin and so forth. But that's not the way it works for an integrator. Yeah, they mark the hardware, but they have so many other items that are relevant to what passes as their margins and what they can protect and save on a project. And one of those things is programming. And one of the things you've heard me talk about repeatedly is that when you are quoting programming for a project, it usually gets buried under services, right? I'm going to send a person out there. And that's not the way to do it. What you need to do is take your programming and line item it like it's a piece of equipment. And then you need to mark that programming up because it's a value that you're bringing to the customer, which is fine. We can talk about that. But here's where I have been frustrated for years. And I just finally got to a point where I couldn't take it anymore, which is manufacturers don't pay near enough attention to modules, plugins, and drivers, right? They Some of them do, and they're very good. Crestron's always been very good at making sure that they had the modules that are needed to communicate with other people. We have mutual friends who were committed at Crestron just for that purpose, you know. But in the end, as we've seen more and more products hit the market, newer products, whether it's windowing platforms or whatever it is, they're just not as committed to developing a proven module that we know we can take and put into a project and have it work out of the box or pretty close anyway. And what we're left with is either a module that maybe was created by somebody else. It was a module that maybe your programmer grabbed the API and whipped something up so they could turn something on and off. But the minute that that module stops working is the minute that people are spending extra time in the field to commission a system and get that commission turned over. And that's what I talk about. And I give an example within this article of a project that we were doing that had it was a giant video wall and a casino. And it had, a lot, I don't remember off the top of my head, but there were a lot of endpoints, a lot of sources going to a lot of endpoints. And we were having trouble making that work. And what we found was that the module that we were using, which was really the only one available, wasn't supported by the company. We went to the manufacturer like, oh, that's old. Well, okay, that's old, but what are we going to do to make this work? We're all sitting here at a job. you know, and I'm not exaggerating. We're on day 10 of a job that should have been done 5 days ago. And the manufacturer's like, well, we really, you know, we'll see what we can do. Right. That that's the margin that I'm talking about. That's the money where the dealer's losing money, I'm losing money, you're losing money, and everybody looks ridiculous simply because, well, we didn't really put any time or effort into it. And for some reason, people, the manufacturers, some are good at it, some are not. And in the end, uh, you absolutely must, and again, to cut to the chase on this without taking up too much time talking, is in the end, for us, if we can't make your project work, somebody comes to me with bill of materials and drawings. I have a project. This is what we're doing. We're going in with this. Here's the bill of materials. What do you see? Well, I see this thing right here. And this thing was a pain in the ass. And I don't want it anywhere near this project anymore. So what I need you to do is pull that out, call Lewis. He's got a suggestion for something here. And I've got a product that will work. And we plug and we play and we know and it's proven. And they're like, great, and they'll pull that piece of equipment out and they'll put in the piece of equipment that we recommend. Manufacturer doesn't always see that. So this is me in the article telling them, this was directed to them. If you really want to increase your sales, you need to make sure that you support these projects because there's little guys like us out here that are telling people to avoid your product like the plague because you support it horribly. And it just doesn't make sense that you would skip over that process for the sake of not supporting. You need your dealers, you need your integrators, you need your installers, you need these people. We're trying to avoid you like the plague, you know, kind of, but they don't hear it, they don't know. So that was the basis for it. And in this particular case, where we were struggling, another module was released by that manufacturer later on after we already started. And it was a commission one by a well-known company that makes modules and plugins and drivers. And we got out of the job and we got everything working. It took us a couple of days to change the code. But in the end, everybody burned countless days. And it's not just being at the job site, it's travel cost, it's phone calls, it's meetings, let's get everybody on a call. It's embarrassing to me that we have manufacturers here that completely ignore what it takes to do this properly. And their competition's starting to catch on, and that's where you're going to lose some of your business. And that was the basis of it. So I'm sorry it took so long, but that's really where the heart of it came from. The original name of the article was Pennywise Manufacturer Foolish, and the people that edited that, well, I can't call manufacturers foolish. I'm calling you foolish. All right, if you don't pay attention to what to support your products so the third party control system can run it, then we're going to call you out on it from now on. And I'm going to tell people to stop using your product. And it's just that simple. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.
No, that was very well put, and I've no, but it's something that you're passionate about, and there's a few different angles that we can go with it on. But first, I'm gonna let James talk about it more from your perspective because you always talk about that you don't necessarily have brand loyalty, and you also talk about that you put in the right solutions for your clients, and sometimes you may or may not be able to have that insight as to what product may be easier to implement from a control perspective if you haven't worked with it before. But is this something that needs to be more in the conversation, knowing that there's a lot of products that are fairly similar in capability these days, and if you're not looking at it based on price, could this be a differentiator?
So yes, it can be what you were saying there, Steve, but I want to go back to something that Mark brought up and which really resonated with me was, you know, people talk, you badmouth companies because they are not helping get things through. Reminds me a lot of us in higher ed and the Slack group I created. And no, it was not created to bash manufacturers or any of that stuff, but it's an area that us higher ed folks talk freely and frankly, and we have very open communication about products, what work, what doesn't work, where issues are. And so word of mouth is very important. Like Mark said, you're actually losing out on money when you don't listen to your true end users of your systems and stuff like that. But going with that whole knowing if it could work or not work, how easy it is to program, is kind of chopped me up to the whole HEPMA approved program. Um, I know I don't think there's much on the driver modules for HEPMA approved that I'm aware of, but we do that with hardware right now, where they go through and they're actually vetted and say, yes, this actually works in a higher ed environment and it meets these criteria, which allows other higher ed folks know, okay, I've never worked with this before, but other schools have. It has been approved, meaning it shouldn't cost me extra time and extra frustration to put this in. So I think those can be actually be very beneficial if there is something like that industry wise where you can make, hey, this is a known module or a known driver or plugin, or even saying, hey, these are reputable companies who that create these module plugins and drivers, and you should be looking for those. We all know a lot of Joe Schmoes who throws things together and throw it on the internet and go, hey, mine works great, and it doesn't. And then the support's not there, like Mark says. And I know we talked about this a long time ago when we talked about module drivers and plugins. And I said I'm not a fan of them. And that was because I'm a control freak. And that's what Mark pointed out, where if there's something wrong with the module driver plugin, you have no control to get in there and fix it or know there's a problem. And that's why I tried to stay away from them. I know it's not always wise, but it's like, and then I know if there's a problem with my code, it's in my code. I don't have to go through somebody else.
Well, and we have we have internal Slack ourselves, right? And with other programming companies that we just kind of talk with if we need a module or something like that. But uh, for us, if we even remotely have a problem with it, we alert everybody. Like we don't even wait anymore. And I'll share it with colleagues. I'll share it with industry people. There used to be this unspoken thing that you really don't speak poorly of the manufacturers, or you may not get what you want. But that changed during COVID and the supply chain, because the issue isn't whether this new whiz bang product that HETMA or anybody else is interested in is works in your particular application. The problem is maybe you used to use just Crestron, and then all of a sudden there was a supply chain issue with endpoints, and now you can't do that anymore. So you had to find a suggestion, an alternate. And that alternate, now maybe there was a module for Crestron, but was there one for QSys? Was there one for Extron? Was there one for AMX? Was there one for like? Is it across the board? No. And that's what I'm talking about. You ultimately need to be able to get these things across the board, because you, as higher education especially, need to know that you've got rooms and classrooms and spaces that you need up and going, man. It's not like, it's not like I'm breaking ground on another project over here. You need your stuff up and going. And if something's not going to do it, you need to know what your options are. And I would love to see, to be honest with you, I would love to see HETMA even maybe take the first step there to coming out and saying these are HETMA approved modules, plugins, and drivers for these manufacturers. That I think would be a tremendous value um, to what we would do. And then I think the industry could probably follow on that, because I don't think the industry's ready to. I don't think you're going to get a VIXA to suddenly come up and say this is what's approved. But I think HETMA could take that. Do you think HETMA could do that? I can't imagine it.
I
Yeah.
so my stint HEPMA has downgraded or changed. I am no longer on a board of directors there. I did my 3 years. Um I'm aware of the approval program, but I haven't been a part. I'm just a general member now, but that is something I can pitch to the new board, the new leader. I can say, hey, here's this idea. I can't say if it's going to go anywhere.
Right.
Um, but HEMA is pretty. That's one thing I've always found refreshing about HEPMA and the community there is they're very open, they're very willing to try things, and you know what? They're not worried about pushing them up sometimes. Yeah, like you said, you got to be careful what you say about manufacturers and all that stuff because there's money there. But in the end, especially in higher ed, like you said, our classes got to work when the classes
Right.
start. Like our classes are scheduled and they're packed. And we can't say, oh, there's a problem with this code, or there's a delay in getting equipment, or hey, this is not working, and say, we're going to push your class back a week.
Right.
They ain't happening.
No.
Classes start when classes start if it working or not working.
Yeah. And I have been on the manufacturer side of classrooms not working when they're supposed to. And it's really unpleasant for the manufacturer because the universities come down like a hammer, you know?
And that's the thing is, like we say in higher ed, the quote Joe Way is, we don't buy one, we buy 200. So we are spending a lot of money. So if we like your product, we're going to be getting a large chunk. We're not buying one offs, two offs. Yeah, do we have those unique rooms? Yes, we do. But most of our rooms are cookie cutters, and
Yeah.
most of us stand our eyes on what our cookie cutters look like. And we might have 200, 300 rooms that are those cookie cutter products. So, yes, we got to make our lives easier.
Yeah. And one of the things that I mentioned in the article, which if anybody would, any of the manufacturers would even bother, I think it would be smart for them to not just make the investment into these modules, plugins, and drivers, but at InfoComm, have promote it, like have signs on you that the phrase I said was, we get along with everyone. And if somebody could come up with this marketing program, we get along with everyone. I get along with Crestron, Biamp, QSys. I get along with these people. My product works with all of them, and we make sure. If you do that, man, I can't even express how powerful that would be, because it's not the owner or the integrator. The integrators, owners, and so forth get it, but it's the field engineers, and it's the people that are in the field trying to make these things work. And they're now, like I said, day 10 of a 5-day job. They want to get back to their family. The holidays are coming up, but they can't leave because we have to get this going and we can't go anywhere until you do. And then the next thing happens is they quit or they move on to another company. All because manufacturers don't take this as seriously as they should. All of them don't. Some of them do, but not all of them.
The other part I'll add too is that somebody has to pay for that expense. So either it's being absorbed as a loss or it's getting transferred over to a client. And then I think that you and I have had this conversation similarly, Mark, is that it's the next opportunity is likely going to go in a different direction if
Yeah.
there's been a bad experience, unless I mean, everybody gets a chance to correct a bad experience, but if it goes uncorrected, it's going to be hard for somebody to be comfortable moving forward with a particular brand or product in the next project.
Well, and again, this is different from the higher ed world. We don't typically play in the higher ed world, but um, we do work in the enterprise world. And so when our company is programming for a customer, for an integrator's customer, we're not just doing a room for that customer. We've probably got 80 rooms going on with that particular end user. Okay, so when they're going to make a change, uh, they don't hesitate. They're like, this thing stinks. It doesn't work. Get it out of here. What have you got? So if the manufacturer looks at a cost of hiring somebody or hiring a company like Steve's to build their module plugins and drivers, if they're going to look at that cost and go, I can't afford that right now. I don't want to spend that money. That's too much money. I get that. But what you're missing is that you just lost an enterprise customer that's got 100 rooms coming. You blew it. All right. So, That's why I said penny wise, manufacturer foolish. You may not be looking at that customer that you just lost until all of a sudden it's Q3 and you're looking at the books and they're going, what happened to XYZ company? Oh, well, we lost them because we had a problem at a job site, so they moved over to our competition. Happens all the time, man. Happens all the time. Pay us now, pay us later. You're gonna somehow or another you're gonna pay. How you pay and when you pay determines where your growth and your profitability comes in.
I think that's a good place for us to stop this one, but we are going to have a second part of this, so please stay tuned for next week because I think what I would like to focus in on is what makes an effective module driver and plugin, and then that's what we're going to uh, have Mark back to talk a little bit more about and why. Similar to what James said, the idea that you have to be able to trust what you're working with. So um, until we get to that episode, Mark LaVecchia from BMA Software Solutions, thanks again for being with us. Please let us know how our audience can get in touch with you, learn what you're up to, learn more about your company, and also provide you some feedback on the article, which will be linked in the show notes.
Yeah, sure. You can find me on LinkedIn at Marc LaVecchia. It's just that simple. We don't really do social media all that much. Although I do have a lot of followers on Twitter or X all of a sudden. I don't know 99 of them, but I have a lot. But yeah, or Mark at BMA Software Solution, Mark with a C at bmasoftwaresolutions.com. Just email me and I'm happy to follow up with you.
Absolutely. Well, thanks again for being part of this, and it's a great
Appreciate the
article and
opportunity.
great conversation. James, how can people get in touch with you, talk more about this topic, and follow what you're up to?
Again, I think everyone should go read Mark's article. Pretty good article. Um, well written. Good ideas in there. And then again, if you're trying to get a hold of me, you can Google me. You'll find me. I'm out there. I'm on X as an AV_James King. I'm on LinkedIn in the AV Ask the Programmer community. I did just sign up for Blue Sky, so I'm playing around with
Mhm.
that. So again, Google me. You'll find me.
I was going to say blue sky because I know that we've both dipped our toe in that, so we'll see how that goes. For me, you can reach me at Steve Greenblatt on social media. My company, Control Concepts, as was mentioned, does support the show and provides some of the building blocks that programmers need to succeed, whether it's integrating manufacturers' products or adding functionality to their systems. We develop those utilities and drivers, modules, and plugins that can be found at controlconcepts.net. We've also like you to join us in the LinkedIn group called Ask the Programmer. That's a great place for you to comment about this episode and share your thoughts about Mark's article and share some of your experiences working with manufacturers' products and whether or not modules, drivers, and plugins have been a benefit to you and your experiences with them. This podcast can be found on the video version on YouTube and the audio version in your favorite podcast player. And we also always welcome comments and feedback as well as ideas. And if anybody wants to be a guest on the show, please reach out and share with us your thoughts. And James and I are very approachable and we would like to hear from you. And until next time, this has been Ask the Programmer.